All right, I'd like to call the meeting of the Capital Funding Protection Committee for Thursday, June 2nd, 2022 to order. May I please have a roll call?
Thank you. Yes. Mr. Reese? Mr. Delgado?
Here.
Ms. Bybee?
Here.
Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Lucy? Ms. Herman?
Here.
Mr. Ivory?
Here.
Mr. Diss? Ms. Bunkowski? And Chair Solara.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
I am also here.
Oh,
Sorry, I was late.
that one.
Sophie
I'm sorry,
Cardinal.
Ms. Cardinal.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd ask that the board bear with me tonight. I'm going to take a few things out of order just to make sure we get some action taken care of. So I'd like to jump to item 3.01, which is general public comment at this time, and then we can come back to it later in the meeting as well. So go ahead and open up item 3.01, which is general public comment. And do we have general public comment?
Yes, we do. Dr. Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of you. My name is Angie Taylor, and I serve as the president of the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to just come and say thank you. Thank you to each of you for all of your time, all of your commitment, for the work that you do to give an extra level of certainty, of clarity, of security, right? That we're doing what we said we're going to do with all the funds that have come from our community. I was president of the board again at that time when WC1 passed. And it was the passage of WC1 that actually helped to create this group. And this is as a board, we made a commitment to our community that you give us these tax dollars, we're only going to use them to build school facilities as outlined in WC1. And we gave them an extra level of certainty, of trust, of assurance that we would not spend money that did not first come through you, this group, the Capital Funding Protection Committee, before we would even consider spending dollars to this in this way. And in case you don't know this, if we disagree with the recommendation that you make, by the way, we have to publicly say why we disagreed, and then it still comes back to you again for consideration. That's how important your role is. So we would not be able to build the schools that we've built, to open the schools, to redo, to renovate the schools that we've renovated, such as O'Brien Middle School and the brand new Hug High School and all the schools that are out there in your communities. So it's just an opportunity for me to just thank you for your work. Thank you for enabling the community to have an extra level of trust in us and making it so that we can say promises made, promises kept, and it's in large part because of the work that you do. Not one thing do we consider at our level having to do with building school facilities without somebody saying, what does the Capital Funding Protection Committee say? And so you mean your decisions mean that much to us, and so we couldn't do it without you. So I just wanted to come and say thank you. Thank you for your work, and may you have 2 years off. Oh, wait, that's the other group. Sorry. Okay. Well, thank you so much. So I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment under 3.01 at this time?
Yes, sir. Mr. Church?
Thank you. Since they moved it forward, I guess I'll speak under this one. Jeff Church, I am a trustee at Washoe County School District. The views are my own. And while Dr. Taylor's still here, I want to say one thing that came up at a public meeting. I was wrong. She was right about the spending. Nobody predicted it was going to go sky high, so the decisions to proceed as you made were the right ones in hindsight. So she can rub that in on me in the future. But what we've done great now has been incredible. That said, and I'm going to be repetitive from the last meeting to get this on the record, I think it's time that we stop building and that we stop bonding. I think that we have a new superintendent coming on in less than 30 days. And so in deference to that new superintendent getting her feet on the ground, I think we really need to consider a hold pattern before we spend money. And I'm going to speak separately on the Debbie Smith issue. As I mentioned previously, our school capacity per our audit is about 75%. We're not overcrowded. There are some misalignments, and some schools are and some schools aren't. But overall, we're not overcrowded. And I want to speak specifically to WC1. I think everybody here probably knows that I oppose that. I opposed it at the last minute because it was forever. It doesn't ever end. There's no way to call it back. There's no way to reduce it other than in the legislature, to the best of my knowledge. So if I had a magic wand, I would go to the legislature and I would say, please, please, it's hurting the county, the cities in Washoe County because people are spending their money elsewhere. And we have the stats. Yeah, it's up, but it's up more in Fernley, it's up more in Lyon County, it's up more in Carson City, even in Winnemucca, because people are going buying their cars there at a lower sales tax rate. So I think we really do need to go to the legislature and say, can we reduce it? And I'd love to see it reduced to a magical number of 7.99% versus 8.26%, so that it's at least competitive with Carson City and with Lyon County. And I would also like to see, now that we're building our schools and we're pretty well have reached that goal, I'd like to see it used for whatever purpose that the Board of Trustees, the elected Board of Trustees, wants to use it for, including teacher raises, bus driver raises, teacher housing, whatever it is. I'd like to have that authority rather than being forced to have this money coming in strictly for building when we don't have the money to pay the teachers that we put in it. We want to decrease classroom size, and building more buildings doesn't do that. Only hiring more teachers does that. So that's my magic wand. I'd love to see WC1 adjusted, not done away with, 7.99%, and give us as a board the authority to use that. And thank you for listening. I got 19 seconds left. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time?
Not on that item, sir.
All right, thank you very much. With that, and given the audience that we've got, I'd like to go ahead and take item 2.07 at this time, which is presentation, discussion, and possible action on the current project schedule and budgeted costs associated with future Debbie Smith Career and Technical Education Academy High School. Mr. Searcy and Mrs. Emmerman.
Thank you, Chairman Solero. Good afternoon. My name is Tammy Zimmerman, and I'm the Deputy Chief Facilities Management Officer and the point person for the Debbie Smith CTE Academy. I'm going to give you the project update. We're going to start back in June of 2020 when we selected Q&D, our construction partner, in an RFQ based off of qualifications. We received, throughout the history of the project from then, multiple formal and comprehensive budgets presented to you guys and to our board. So in August of 2021, we brought a presentation only to you with the budgeted estimate at that time, as well as in December of 2021, another one where we gave you a range of $98 million to $102 million for that construction portion. We then came back in February of 2022 and asked for approval of the construction budget, which was $112 million. And that was based off of contingencies in there, escalation, construction contingencies, and our owner contingencies as well. And you can see those percentages in there. That was all factored into that budget. And those budgets were all independently estimated by OCMI, O'Connor Construction Management, for us. So we felt very confident in those estimates. The bid results came in April. The bid period started in March. We opened them in mid-April with Q&D Construction, and Washoe County School District was there at the table with the bid opening. The draft GMP we received in early May from Q&D Construction at $142.8 million, and that did not include owner contingency. So let me compare that apples to apples. When you go include our owner contingency, it's $147 million compared to what we asked for approval for $112 million. So we're at a $35 million delta, or over 30% over budget with that. This has left us with some questions and some choices that we have to make. And with our constraints in Washoe County School District's budgets, state law, and the expectations of the taxpayers, we have this decision to make tonight. Bid results with escalation, schedule, and participation as part of those high points that we saw. In the contract for Washoe County School District, it's the same contract we have with all of our construction projects. The language is the same, and we give that to our builders to put in their documents. Extreme conditions are being seen out there in construction. Market uncertainty and escalation prices, not just us, but other agencies and other partners are seeing it as well. So our proposed GMP contract also includes the contractor's contingency and additional escalation on that, which totals about $7.5 million. And what we've heard is that there's additional escalation in the bidders' numbers as well because of the uncertainty. Timing of the 2022 work conflicted with multiple bidders for participating, resulting in our demo numbers are approximately $10 million over the estimate. That the demo is part of our critical path, so it had a timing on there that had to be met. So we believe that added to this over budget number. Extreme supply chains, they continue to plague our partners with uncertainty, manufacturers providing, the appropriate materials at the appropriate times with the dollars that they're promised. A lot of them say that they're not shipping them out until they have a contract with a dollar and a transportation cost or delivery cost with that right at the time of actually shipping it out of their manufacturers. Some were unable to bid due to the escalation, increasing their price and putting them over their bid limits.
So we've talked a little bit about how we got here, about the effort that was put in by a multidisciplinary team for the better part of 2 years to arrive at that budget. Every best practice and industry resource was brought to bear in developing that budget. Similarly, the bid was opened publicly and conducted competitively. Some of the slides that Tammy just went through are snapshots of the conversations and the discussion that we've had with our entire team over the last 3 and 4 weeks to really dissect what actually composes this unexpected bid outcome. But before we dive into any next steps, we wanted to make sure to emphasize the point that the school district, regardless of these turns of events, remains 100% committed to the mission and vision of this project, that it has long been anticipated and understood and articulated as one of tremendous importance in our community. And as with all of our projects, we seek to adapt and persevere. However, as I just kind of described, the response to these bid results has been a collaborative effort, just as the development of the budget was a team effort. Many different scenarios were discussed, very far outside of the norm, in an effort to balance all of the variables and constraints in front of us in light of these bid results. So I wanted to give that as a bit of a preface to the summarized options that are presented here this evening. Again, these are very much summarized options. Each of them were discussed with many different variations, but in an effort to sort of summarize the various scenarios that we've debated amongst our team, we roll it up into 3 different options this evening. So of course the first one we labeled as option 1, simply award as proposed. Tammy went through a bunch of the details on that. These are intended, these bullets, to reflect sort of a pro and con analysis of or critique of these various options. So first of all, of course, awarding it as proposed would maintain the current planned opening date of this school as August 2024. That's got exceptional value to it, of course. However, on the downside, awarding it as proposed, given the planned budget versus the actual bid results, is simply financially infeasible for WCSD. Mr. Mathers talked a bit before about the layers of process associated with our debt commitments, and currently there is just insufficient budgeted appropriations to cover this scale of a contract. We had planned for a $112 million contract, and to cover $147 million at this time is simply not possible. And there is not also the ability to sweep savings or other appropriations to cover this cost at this time. This similar point speaks a little bit more to Mr. Mathers' bonding authority approval earlier. Still multiple steps to go in that process, and at this time there are no remaining bonding authority monies available to cover this increase. So, and then lastly, of course, throughout all of this, we've discussed opportunities. As with any setback, there are lessons learned, and we believe there are always and would potentially be opportunities for improvement should we go with other options. So we see that as a downside to this option. That's a really high-level summary of option one, awarding it as proposed, some pros and some cons. Again, a one-slide summary of option two, defined as to pursue a phased delivery. Now, this is intentionally somewhat nebulous, but it, as described here, has an upside of allowing construction to begin in this calendar year. We believe that there are portions or a phased portion of this total project scope that we could initiate in this calendar year, and we feel that would be a benefit to this option. Also, next up, it would allow for value engineering or other opportunities, as I referred to them before, to perhaps learn from some lessons that we've recently learned from and incorporate that value into the project. It also would allow for more appropriate, larger financial adjustments to be made. You know, the school district and Mr. Mathers can solve significant challenges financially, but it takes time and process to do so. So this option affords us the time in which to make those financial adjustments to afford this project at the budget that is currently proposed, rather than dramatically cutting scope to fit it within the budget that was previously proposed. Downsides to this option inevitably require rebidding. That is an extremely unfortunate and frustrating scenario that all owners and contractors seek to avoid. It's not one that we take lightly, and we absolutely wanted to highlight that as a downside to this option. Certainly market conditions may worsen. I'm not intending to debate that or try to predict the future, but that is a potential downside with extending this into the future. And then very importantly, it's necessary to be clear that this option would delay the opening of this project until at least August 2025. So while we could begin construction, there are inefficiencies with phased delivery and some time that would be needed to recalibrate our approach, both financially and in other ways, and that would delay the opening or the total completion by at least one school year. So that's option two in a nutshell. And then lastly, on the other end of the spectrum, summarizing option three of a pause indefinitely. We have a complete set of contract documents. We have a scope of this project that we feel very positive about, that balances the existing assets with proposed demolition and new assets, and this essentially could be considered to be one where we put the project on the shelf for a period of some time. This could allow for a more comprehensive redesign. It would allow us to take a closer look, a deeper look at that scope. It could also allow the school district to time the bid for this project at a future period that is more economically favorable. That's a risk, but it could be an upside as well. Obviously, the intent with this option would be to likely delay the opening more than one school year, and that's a noteworthy downside to this option. And of course, that this option could result in actually continued persistent escalation and increasing construction costs. It is a risk. However, this is, I think, a good representation of the challenging and frustrating options that we've had the poor fortune of debating over the last several weeks. I cannot emphasize enough how disappointed and frustrated everyone involved in this project is to be having this conversation here today. The contractor, the architect, the superintendent of the school district, everybody that has been involved or has hoped for this project to be brought to fruition is frustrated about the situation, and it's not for lack of effort for many years. These are truly uncertain times and very difficult to navigate. We've been dealt a blow, a curveball, a big curveball, and we're working together to come up with alternatives to keep this project moving forward. Unfortunately, none of them are exactly as we had planned several months prior. And we're bringing this to you tonight for action in full transparency because we understand the gravity of the situation. We wanted to actually request a vote on this. This does come with a recommendation from staff with support of the superintendent for option 2. This is just a suggested motion verbiage here, but it's intentional in its specificity, but also its vagueness. So, deferring immediate construction to best adjust, as I've described, and balance the financial constraints and the commitments that the school district has made with the needs of the community and the commitments to this particular project. It's a challenging balance to try and strike, but we feel given all variables in play and all voices in play that this is the recommended path forward. And that's the conclusion of our presentation. Thank you very much.
Is there any questions for Mr. Searcy on this? Mr. Ivory.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Justin Ivory. But can we start with option 1, maybe questions? We know where we're at today, which is, in order to make this project go forward, we basically need $147 million. We don't have the bonding capability for the $147 million. But where is our ceiling at currently on bonding capabilities on this project?
So as some of you may recall, we've gone through multiple budget presentations on this. At one point in time, it was estimated at $85 million. I think previously we talked about it being presented closer to the $100 million mark. With our final budget coming up to 112, working with Mark Mathers in the business office, we really swept a variety of different sources, remaining fund balances and some existing revenues that exceeded projections, really scraped those funds dry to fund the $112 million budget. So the short answer to your question is that we don't have more than $112 million to fund this project based on all of the planning that has gone up until this point.
Okay. And then, so to carry on with that kind of the same line item, what's our time frame to recalibrate our bonding capability? Because I know that there's future money available, but because we're locked in on a fiscal year, what is our time frame to recalibrate that, where we would have the money? Are we talking a month? Or are we talking 6 months?
So I would like to just open with the recognition that we do have the funds and the authority for up to $112 million. And with the phased approach, we anticipate being able to issue multiple potential construction contracts within that budget and with those monies. So that will allow the project to move forward, as I mentioned, in this calendar year. But meanwhile, the financial recalibration I'll leave to Mr. Mathers to answer.
So again, to clarify, we have no remaining bonding authority at all currently. We cannot issue any more debt currently. That's why the oversight panel took the action it did to authorize additional debt. We will go to the Debt Management Commission for that later this month, and then we will have to go back to the Board of Trustees. We're likely looking at a sale date for any new bonds in the fall, so roughly September. So we can take that time, I hope I'm getting to your question. We can take the time between now and September to kind of construct a phased approach, if that's what the board chooses to do and this committee votes to do. And then we would have the ability to adjust and make changes to the capital improvement program and augment the budget in the fall when we do issue debt. I hope that answers your question.
It does, yep. Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, then, if you'll indulge me some more. Option 2, just trying to make sure, more than anything else, just trying to get there's some questions out here so we're making the decision with as much information as we possibly can. The valued engineering tool that you're talking about going back and on your redesign and maybe valued engineering, the valued engineering tool also is used during construction phase, correct? You don't necessarily have to go back right now to do valued engineering. Between the owner and the contractor, I'm assuming a valued engineering thing can be done throughout the entire construction project. Is that correct?
That's certainly correct. We're always trying to get it right all the way right up until the concrete's poured. It's certainly of greater value if it's incorporated into the bid documents, right? So the opportunity to make those changes before it goes out to bid is really where the most value can be found.
Okay. And then I know on this project and every project prior to, we've not had an escalation clause in our general contract with the general contractor. And I know that at times that helps us to kind of bring in projects on time and under budget, because when you have an escalation clause in there, a lot of times if we'd had, it worked out well for us, don't get me wrong. In the past 2 years, it's worked out extremely well for us because the contractors have been locked in on their numbers and they would have been coming to us with major increases throughout that time. But I think moving forward, regardless of what happens with this one, I think it's really time that we start to at least look at the process of getting some sort of escalation clause language in our contracts, because in our position, we don't want to be hurting the contractor or hurting the owner. And an escalation clause, keep in mind, always works in both directions. So if the prices out there are going through the roof, it protects the contractor and it also gets us the cheapest price on bid day, a realistic price on bid day, although it does not put a ceiling to that bid, obviously. But anyway, I don't want to go on and on, but I think it's something that in future meetings, I think we need to start discussing maybe a process in which we determine on, maybe set the criteria up so this would trigger an escalation clause be used in the general contract. Might be a better way to do it. And then my only other question on option 2 then, if we are adding an extra year to this project, what is our known cost in doing that? I know we've got, Washoe County staff, we've got construction manager staff, we've got CMAR staff. There's a lot of things, design, all that. I mean, have we got like any kind of rough budget that we know, like, because obviously we're looking at a 31% increase, but I mean, if it's like out of the world for adding the extra year, I know per year it's very expensive. So I'm just wondering, do we have that?
So I think you're referring to, really the costs associated or the inefficiencies that inevitably stem from a phased delivery. Option 2 is our recommendation, and an option largely because of the extreme issues with options 1 and option 3. But there is an added cost, not only in extending the total duration of any project, some inefficiencies there, but oftentimes breaking the project up into multiple phases adds some costs. So back of the envelope, we're talking maybe a 30% increase in time. That's not construction dollars. So we're going to leave the, does the market change one way or the other, or do we find other opportunities or efficiencies in rebidding it? We'll leave that aside, but certainly the staff time, the additional time to manage the project and oversee the project, those professional services, like we refer to them, I believe were originally budgeted for approximately $8 million. So a certain redesign fee to adjust the documents, not only value engineer them, but break them up into separate bid packages, in addition to the additional man hours, basically, that would be necessary to manage this project for potentially a third longer. We're probably into the, $3 to $5 million range of additional overhead associated with those inefficiencies. That's really just a back of the envelope, and then setting aside the construction costs, which, we have reason to hope that we could improve upon, but there will inevitably be inefficiencies and costs associated with that relative to the phased delivery.
Okay, thank you. That's what I've got.
Any other questions? Spivey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got several questions. Can you explain why it would require rebidding the whole process if we went to the phased approach? Boy, that just seems like it opens Pandora's box, and we might lose contractors that bid now and might not bid. We won't necessarily get lower bids or more bids. What is it that triggers a requirement to rebid?
The way this project was advertised and procured initially was as one entire project. And so we did work with the CMAR contractor and discuss with subcontractors potential scenarios where we only awarded a portion of the original total scope, sort of pursuing a phased delivery, but making use of the bids that we have in hand today, just not in their entirety. And unfortunately, it wasn't bid in that fashion. So those bids would essentially be invalid. We'd be talking about a different scope, which is only fair to allow them to reconsider that scope very specifically. And then, of course, the timing, the timing necessary to obtain the financing necessary to execute the bid as presented would create too much of a lag between when those bids were provided and when we could actually execute them. They couldn't be expected to hold that price.
Well, and all of us can just look at our gas stations on a weekly basis and know how much that's going up daily, that the bids coming in are going to be higher just because that's where we are. And I'm really concerned about market conditions, and where we are now is not in a great place, but I don't see it in the near future getting any better, and that's a big concern for me. On the value engineering, I don't know if this falls under value engineering, but you talked about the demo prices of how they were $10 million more for your the demo budget that you have. Is there a standard procedure? I'm not a construction person, so I'm probably not even using the right words. But when you're doing a demo project, do you have policy procedures or ways that you ask the contractors to perform that? If they come back with a less, something with a lower cost that doesn't follow, say with this school, demoing and then removing the whole school versus piece by piece. I mean, are there opportunities in the way that we've always done the rest of our schools that working together with the contractor, there can be more fiscally, that would help with the fiscal side of this, that we're locked in because it's how we've always done something? And are there opportunities to really relook at the whole project from a value engineering and opportunity with contractors, subcontractors, and the school district to find new ways to do something that'll be more cost efficient that we could take advantage of? I know it's not $30 million, but I mean, I'm just looking for how can we improve that bottom line?
And that's part of the CMR process, is working through the construction manager at risk that we have and meeting out on site. We've done that throughout this project with Q&D. But when we demo buildings, we are also held to air quality standards, Washoe County Health Department with asbestos and lead standards. So we still have to meet those. And when we do that, when we do the design, we actually put specifications together and we review them as a group. We get feedback. We go back and change things based off of that. We get constructability feedback. The designer will go back and change things. We are a partner in that whole process, and we do that in an ongoing process throughout the design. So we do that, and there are some things up there with HUG that it's challenging in demolishing those buildings with lead and asbestos procedures. And we have worked with the health department recently, and we've had those relaxed based off of some additional testing and that we've done to do it. So we do those things, and we would continue to do them through the phase project and with our partners and our designers to go through and look at those opportunities.
Okay, and sorry, Mr. Chair. So that answers that. I guess I'm looking at the big concern I have, obviously, the money and how we can make this happen. We need to. We promised the community we would, and we have a critical workforce issue in this community. And this school is going to provide the workforce with the trade school, with what Debbie Smith CTE Academy is going to provide for the economy and for our local economy, for not just our kids, but for the community, for our businesses. It's needed now. And this was filling that gap. So delaying it or slowing it down for me is a real issue because it is something that we need, and I want to see how we can get there. You know, I'm looking through the rest of the budget that we haven't approved, and I'm looking at elementary school number 5. I'm looking at Rio Wrangler. I'm looking at land acquisition. You know, almost $21 million right there in those 3. If we're only 75%, you know, average occupancy of our schools, are those things that we can push down the road because it's not needed as critically as this facility is. And I will have to say, I've been so just really champion with you guys because every school we've built, we've been on time, we've been under budget, and done like an exceptional job. And this one is a challenge. And I just am looking at other places in the budget and other plans that maybe, you know, I don't see another elementary school or some of these things in the land to go with them. A delay a year or two down the line in order for this to happen is kind of where I'm going. And I don't know if that's feasible. Just a thought. Thank you.
Ms. Cardinal.
Sophie Cardinal for the record. So I think what I heard you say about option number 2 is the financial adjustment that you'd be making later is likely going to be the use of the bond that I think I missed in the earlier meeting, the $300 million bond that's to come in the fall. Is that correct?
That's one option. Another option would be deferral or cancellation of other projects. I guess to be very clear, and you did miss the presentation.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I just want to catch you up to speed. The $298 million of bonds that we proposed and the oversight panel approved actually does cover projects in years 1, 2, and 3 of the 23-27 CIP. So those bond proceeds are spoken for. So what we would have to do is shift projects around, i.e. deferral or cancellation of other projects if we wanted to do this all in one shot in year 1 of the CIP, which is fiscal year 23. So that's what we would have to do because It's not like that's $300 million was just for unspoken projects.
Have you considered which projects you might defer yet?
We haven't had that conversation internally yet. No.
Okay. Thank you.
I would at least offer to that a significant amount of the noted recipients of those proceeds is related to existing school modernization projects that are still to be determined. So they've been, identified in budget only, and we've talked before, we're proceeding with a district-wide facilities master plan study to hopefully identify those. But I think those would be less schedule-driven than, say, for example, a new elementary school that's intended to relieve severe and increasing overcrowding in a different area. But again, that's just a speculation to respond to your comment.
Thank you. Okay, one follow-up then. So I know staff is recommending option 2, and Ms. Bybee already mentioned a little bit about why there's this need to continue on with Debbie Smith. But can you please, for our benefit, explain why you want to continue on with this rather than delay it? Why you're recommending number 2?
I appreciate the question, kind of referring to option 3 rather. This is a unique one. As much as we remain committed to the project, we did debate all angles of this. And this project is not quite the same as some of our other new school projects where there has been a school at 130% of capacity with 4 and 5 mobiles on their campus. This school is needed, but it is not needed from an overcrowding standpoint. Also, some of the other downsides, or that said, the downside to pausing indefinitely, mothballing a campus of this, we're going to have a vacant campus here in a couple of weeks, whether we like it or not. So no activity on that campus whatsoever has a cost for sure to manage that property and maintain it safely. There's risk associated with that. And then also really politically in our commitments to this community, weighing that perception versus the bet that we would actually time a rebid 36 months into the future and somehow hit the market just perfectly to save $30 million is a risky bet in the face of the political downside and the lack of commitment to our community, as well as just having that vacant campus and that liability hanging out there. We debated this from all different angles. There's some real pros and cons to that, but ultimately that's what turned us away from option 3.
Mr. Anderson.
And I was hoping you could just expand a little bit more on the overcrowding situation demand. I mean, obviously the last couple of years have kind of thrown a wrench in things as far as being able to forecast, but taking away from the fact of what that school was going to specialize in and help those kids into, what you said that the demand is not necessary right now. So how close are we to being at that point where it is needed to avoid overcrowding?
So from an overcrowding standpoint, this project is not needed. I'll say that crystal clear. There's overcrowding in 2025. There will be one high school which is over capacity, which is North Valley's high school, and we are projecting a new high school in the Cold Springs area inside of this decade to relieve that situation. This project has always been envisioned to meet a very different need, a very similarly important need. But from an overcrowding standpoint, while we've factored in the impacts of this school into our enrollment and capacity projections, it is not the same equation as all of the other new schools that we've talked about to date. That doesn't diminish the need. I don't want to, have that be misconstrued, but from an overcrowding relief standpoint, that's not what's driving this project.
One more. This is more of a comment than a question. And I just thinking about projects that we do at the city of Sparks, for example. If we need 10 streets that are in need of repaving, we'll talk to the contractors and say, well, what if we make it 15 streets? And in those efforts, we're able to sometimes bring in a larger project at close to what we had in budget in the first place. I just want to say that I really think, and I realize staff is recommending option 2. In my opinion, I think it's going to turn to be lengthy and potentially going to be costing us more because now we're piecing it up. And anyone that's looking at it now is not looking at the entire project, but just segments of it, and potentially that's all they're going to get is one segment. So I guess I just want to make that comment that I just don't see that that's going to be our best route. And I understand that it'll help the project keep moving forward, but I just don't see as that being the best option. Thank you.
Mr. Ivory.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Justin Ivory for the record. Adam, just so I'm not leaving this meeting wondering to myself, why didn't I ask that question? So Ms. Cardinal mentioned that there's an opportunity to defer in the future. So I guess my question becomes right now is, does that mean that we're at the end of our rope? This was the last school in this process of bonding, or do we have other items that are out there that are accounted for but aren't necessarily, we haven't actually moved forward on, that we could defer that project and get this one to go? Because I don't know.
So Mark Mathers again for the record. So I'll try to be clear. Our problem is we're at the end of our fiscal year. And so we don't have the ability to defer or cancel any projects that were planned for this fiscal year because they've been completed. The Debbie Smith CTE Academy was going to be paid in the, as identified in our fiscal year 22 CIP through a combination of WC1 sales tax revenues that we've received, and then existing savings from current projects. And as Adam kind of went into, the fiscal year 22 CIP actually had budgeted only $85 million for Debbie Smith. So as Adam mentioned, we scoured all of the remaining savings of current projects we could. We also identified where we could augment the budget for increased sales tax revenues we've received and project for fiscal year 22. That got us to the $112 million. But because we're at the, in June, there's no current projects that haven't been done that we can now cancel or defer. There's no additional augmentations we can do. So basically, we would have to violate state law to encumber a contract of $147 million against our current budget, or what we could augment. And obviously, we can't do that. So that's the problem we have in the current fiscal year. We just don't have the ability to cancel or defer any projects. In fiscal year 23, we would, because we're starting off in a new fiscal year. And so as Adam mentioned, we have some projects that come out of the modernization study that conceivably could be shifted around. But for fiscal year 22, we don't have the appropriation authority, sufficient appropriation authority, nor savings anywhere else that we haven't already identified to cover a $147 million contract. That's our problem.
And I appreciate the answer there. The only thing I just want to be crystal clear with this, because later on in this meeting, we're going to approve spending like another $50 million, $40 to $50 million for the next year's revitalization of existing schools. Mm-hmm. And I guess what I'm saying is, if we was to push that off into the 2023 budget, could that money be used?
So to clarify, the approval for you tonight is for the fiscal year 23 capital renewal plan. It's for next year's capital renewal plan. We try to get your approval in June ahead of the start of the fiscal year, just so that we can mobilize and be ready to start come July 1. But that's not, that authorization is not utilizing any fiscal year 22 revenues or appropriations. So I hope that explains it. So we could defer the fiscal year 23 capital renewal plan in fiscal year 23 after July 1, but that doesn't help us for fiscal year 22, the current fiscal year we're in.
Okay, perfect. That absolutely answers my question. That's, like I say, more than anything else, I know the time and effort that's gone into this project, between our own staff, the general contractor, all the subcontractors in town. I don't mean to be grabbing at straws, but I want to leave this meeting knowing that we looked at everything possible prior to making our decision. So thank you.
Ms. Gardner.
Mark, you might just stay up there. Okay, I'm going to ask a silly question, but it's almost the next fiscal year. What if is it possible to wait to award this contract until fiscal year 23, which is just in a month or so, at the 147 million, and then dedicate a portion of those new bonds that are being issued in the fall to it? And then bring along that 112 million from fiscal year 22?
I think so financially that's feasible. It depends again on revising the capital improvement program and a number of steps.
Yeah, you'd have to augment the budget,
Yeah,
right?
augmentation of the budget and a number of steps. But I can't speak to the procurement questions that would entail as well.
And I'll comment on that. As I mentioned previously, these bids were actually received in April 2022. So it's debatable whether or not, what that would look like to actually take those bids and generate a contract after July 1st, 2022, right? Some 3.5 months in today's market. I think there would be significant concerns from citizens on a variety of aspects of that. But conceptually, this is the type of debates that we've had in the office for the last month, thinking outside of the box. There's some real risks and pros and cons with that, but generally, that's not the duration from the time bids are submitted to the time a contract's actually inked.
I understand. I'm just saying, if it's possible, we should consider it, right? Because what I'm hearing, option 1 isn't feasible because of timing. So I'm just throwing that out there.
I guess I could be a little more direct. That is not the recommendation of the Washoe County School District.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Avery?
I understand that it would be a longer time frame because and basically it's, I guess what I'm asking, I guess in my head I'm thinking the year ends in December, but I'm assuming the year must end for us in June. And this is why we have smart people on the committee. So with that being said, I think, if I'm not mistaken, if we only delayed it a month to the contract, I think we can all agree, and we could maybe even bring the general contractor up here, but they have escalation bid into the project for 2 years. So I can't imagine that something's going to happen in the next month that's going to change their subcontractors to say, oh no, it went up so high in the last month that it ate up all of our escalation for the 2-year process. I guess, can we bring up Q&D and see if maybe, if at least it's a viable option? I mean, I don't want to spend a bunch of time going through and doing all this just to have Q&D say, yeah, sorry, there's no way we could hold our number, or no way we could get our subcontractors to hold our number. I just think, and I can appreciate that option 2 is the way staff wants to go with this. I really do. And I know you guys, I've been on the phone with Adam several times in the last few weeks. I know you guys are looking at this every different way, but I know just to start, ground zero, if we get this done in 2 years, we know we're going to automatically save $3 to $5 million. That's you know what I mean? That's pretty much a given. We don't know whether the rest of the job's going to come in under the 147 or whether it's going to go over the 147. Nobody's got that crystal ball. But we do know today on making the decision that we could potentially save 3 to 5. So I guess I would ask, maybe if Q&D could come up and just at least answer the question for us.
Yeah, I think I think that'd be good if Q&D is willing to come up and answer that question in this open meeting.
Lance Semenko, I'm the president of Q&D Construction. Actually, in our bids, we have a 90-day price hold for all the subs on this project. So that would hold for us if we knew, but we'd have to get a time frame to allow them to say, hey, here's where we're at. We need to sign on the dotted line. So that's kind of where we're at on our pricing.
Is that 90 days from the day you
From the
opened
bid
bids?
date. It was from the bid date.
Right,
So
so-
you have till July. And if we called the major players, I'm pretty sure, I know there's one here, you could ask him, but not to put him on the spot, but you could ask him.
How about at this point, we open it up for public comment, because I'm guessing that some public comment might cover some of this, and then we can run through that piece, and so public comment, please.
Mr. Semenko.
Okay, I got to
you're
go
up.
first. I didn't know if I was going to get a chance to talk or not. So, you know, as Q&D, we want to partner with everyone. We've had a great relationship with the school district. Obviously, for us, option one works. Number one, we have the strongest team. Everybody's bought in on the project. Escalation's built in, as you guys have been told or heard. So for us, that's a positive. It allows the school to get open. We're in dire need. Everyone in this community, everyone in the whole country, for crying out loud, needs at workforce development. This school is a perfect school for that. So that's going to help not only us as contractors, but it's going to help the school district, because those are the kids that are going to be building the schools down the road. I'm not going to be building schools down the road. So that's a big deal for us in option one. Option two, I mean, yeah, we're willing to work with the school district. We always have, we always will. But at the end of the day, I think as a community, we owe it to the kids. Did we know the prices were going to go up? No, not like they did. Absolutely not. But I don't think with the phased, the scary part for us is if we phase it, there's no guarantees that these subs are going to have, you know, when you break it into thirds, you can buy the whole piece of cake or you can buy two pieces. It's going to cost more, in our opinion. So that's where we're at as far as Q&D goes. So I appreciate your guys' time. If you have any questions, let me know.
Mr. Savage.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee, school district. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you got it? There we go. Again, Len Savage for the record, Mr. Chairman, committee, the district, Dr. McNeil, Mr. Richard, Mr. Mathers, Tammy, Adam, Q&D Construction, everybody has worked feverishly on this project to this point. And so I thank you, first of all. The fiduciary responsibility is not easy. And we believe in education, and we're strong proponents of that. And of course, we're contractors. Our price does hold for 2 years like the specifications required. You're fortunate because this is a CMAR delivery. It's not a hard bid delivery. If you go back to bids, it could get crazy. Rebidding, like Adam said, is not good for anybody. And we're all in this together. It's not us versus them or them versus us. We want the best for the students at the end of the day. And I think listening here tonight, the way to go would be option one, go back to try to get more money after July 1st, because in respect to Adam and Tammy, they're working within their boundaries. July 1 was it. They're out of money. So they had no other option than to recommend option number two.
in my humble opinion. I'm not speaking for them. That's what I just learned tonight. But as a trusted contractor, Q&D Construction, you have them on board right now as the Seymour. And you have major subcontractors like ourselves that are homegrown, educated Washoe County kids, grandfathers with their kids. I mean, it just goes on and on. And we have a lot of brilliant minds in this room. And the last time I was here was when I was with the Proctor Hug family, and they were naming the Hug High School. And Debbie Smith's family was here at that same time. And it was very emotional, and it was a challenging meeting. And at that time, Hug was taken and Debbie Smith was taken. And I just ask everyone to do the best we can to try to make this thing work. And I know it can be done, because when there's a will, there's a way. And the workforce needs it, the district needs it, the community needs it, the students and family need it. But in 40 years of working as a contractor, I've never seen prices go down significantly. And you're asking for significant prices. But we work with the district on many projects. We pride ourselves in partnering with them. And we would do anything and everything to value engineer to make this thing work for the betterment of the building and the community at the end of the day. We need to make winners. So I'm hoping that calmer heads prevail. And I'm always open for a question if anybody has one. Thank you. That's all I have. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Church? Pardon me. Mr. Church? That would be the end of public comment.
All right, thank you very much. We'll bring it back to the board. Any other questions for staff? Mr. Ivory?
Okay, so now we've opened this can of worms. So I guess my next question would be, it doesn't necessarily have to be, if we're into the next fiscal year, it doesn't necessarily have to be the one we're approving later today. It could actually be a different project. Is that correct? Am I understanding that? So, because I know that because Adam and I actually kind of kicked this around a little bit, but you know, it's problematic to delay the improvements around the community, because if that one gets delayed, a lot of those get done in the summer months. So therefore you miss your bid time. And, you know, here we are, we say, you know, then we're putting one school ahead of lots of other schools. So I guess my question would be, it would be my preference if we was to use that money from other projects than that one.
I understand what you're saying. I think it's important that the committee understand that, you know, that action would come at a cost, right? So when we talk about core school investments and doing projects like Swope and O'Brien again and again throughout the community in some sort, those will likely be the ones that are delayed. But to speak to your comment about the capital renewal program that we're planning to review tonight, those are very time-sensitive, seasonal type of projects in existing active schools. So even a several-month delay in proceeding with that program would likely cost us the summer 2023 construction window. So your re-roofing and all of that type of stuff that needs to hit that window would miss that window and effectively postpone that program by a year. So that's not the one to mess with, but those other existing school investments are not as time specific and they are yet to be identified, but would suffer an impact from a decision to proceed with this as proposed.
So let me clarify a little. I'm looking at the fiscal year 23 CIP. And just to try to answer your question, Mr. Ivory. So in the revised CIP in your packet, on page 2, it does lay out total construction projects of $64 million. So as Ms. Cardinal said, we're going to carry over the $112 million in funding we had identified in 22 into 23. But then I need another 35 to 37 million, right? And so if I look at that CIP on page 2, this gets really technical, right? I don't have a approved bond resolution, so I've got to use existing appropriation authority for the moment. So really the only sizable projects and discretionary projects that I can defer or switch around on page 2 are the core school investments, as Adam mentioned, which are 1.5, 2.5, and 1.5 million. So that's 5.5 million. We really can't defer. I mean, that Debbie Smith line is for construction management and FF&E. So if you want to pursue Debbie Smith, not all of that I can sweep. Transportation expansion I could sweep. Rio Wrangler we can't sweep. That's underway. So that does leave, basically, in order to get to the 35 or 37, I've got, we, not I, the district would have to defer the great portion of the 36.5 million for capital renewal.
So that's why you don't recommend option 1, because you don't want to defer those projects? Is that right, Adam? Because it sounded like you felt very strongly that you did not like my proposal there for a minute. And I'm just trying to understand why. Is that why you don't want to move it to fiscal year 23 and continue on with option 1?
I would say that's probably the strongest reason, the most compelling reason. I think several pages of the presentation were also dedicated towards concerns and disappointments associated with the bid results. Lack of participation, schedule constraints, partners that were unable or unwilling to participate for a variety of reasons. Can't predict the future, but the bids, the GMP as presented leaves a bit to be desired, unfortunately.
And how will option 2 help you there? Because I agree, I don't really think costs are going to go down anytime soon. So if you're rebidding different phases, I'm just concerned that we're going to end up spending a lot more and you'll still be disappointed.
Again, option 2 gives us the time to make the financial adjustments that are necessary to afford a project of this scale. And then as far as how much it ends up ultimately costing, I'm not going to continue to speculate on what the future holds there.
So the financial adjustment is really just the budget authority that's going to come with those bonds in the fall. Is that right? Because I'm just trying to understand Mark's situation. It sounds like, I know how encumbrances work. I understand that in order to encumber this contract in July, you have to take it from other projects, which means you then can't issue encumbrances on your other projects. So I understand that's the concern primarily, right? Because then it wouldn't be until fall when you get that extra budget appropriation. Is that right? Or do you have that appropriation now in your budget?
No, I do not.
You do not?
So
Okay.
it will have to wait for passage of the bond resolution and the issuance of the new debt.
Okay, I'm understanding.
Yeah.
That stinks.
I mean, I'll just say, in addition, I mean, there's an opportunity cost, right? When you have a cost increase to 35 million, that's one whole new elementary school. And I know we don't think costs will go down, prices will go down, but there is a thing called recency bias. And so we all think the world we're living in continues, but that doesn't always happen, right? So, I think, that hasn't been said quite that directly, but I'll say it, that there's an opportunity cost here. The bids came out $35 million more than the estimate, and that's a whole school. Mm-hmm. And, needs to be some consideration of, I think, the policy choice of, do I rebuild an existing elementary school in a core area that desperately needs it, and try to manage around this, or do I just go ahead and do this? And so, we don't have an infinite amount of money, obviously. So there's that consideration too that I think, the board would have to wrestle with, in addition to kind of the budgeting intricacies and funding intricacies and complexities.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Bybee.
Okay, I'm not an accountant, so I'm really trying to kind of stay on board here with, I guess, my question on, I guess this would be for Mr. Mather too. Are we only looking at what our capital projects, the construction costs for the upcoming fiscal year 2022, 2023 of trying to sweep money into what we need for this? Because as I look up another year, like the core school investments, which we all agree are like super important, but I'm looking at the difference in fiscal year 2, 3, 4, and 5 is up to 40 million, 50 million, 25 million. It raises substantially out. So is it kind of on some of these, whether it's the core school investments that we're chipping away at some of those, is it delaying things a year on some of the projects? I still don't see elementary school number 5 is in this 2022-23. It's $3 million. I don't know why that can't be moved. I don't know how much of the land, well, the land isn't till the next year. But is it just a matter of if we don't spend the core school investments for 2022-23, there's big pots projected for the next year, and I don't know if that can be touched, or it'll be a little bit slower. I mean, will we just be pushing everything, delaying things a year on some projects, 2 years on another, if we go ahead and we want this one built now?
Yeah,
It's like a domino effect that kind of,
Yeah.
and I guess that's priorities. Where do we think is most important, and what can wait a year? What can wait 2 years? And I think in budgeting, all of us from a city perspective to our personal pocketbooks have to make those decisions all the time. When there isn't enough money, how do we prioritize?
Yeah. So this is like budget 501. This isn't budget 101. What the scenario I think we're talking about would be, because I don't have a bond resolution approved by our board, and I don't have existing bonding authority, I can't encumber the $147 million project in fiscal year 23 or early in fiscal year 23 unless I defer a great portion of the $36 million annual capital renewal program, which Adam had kind of indicated then we lose the summer construction period, which is a big issue for us because we're a school district and kids are in school after summer. So it is a deferral of the start of that annual capital renewal program until we can get that bond resolution passed and issue debt. And then, yes, we could choose to issue more debt than we contemplated in the CIP at that point, but then you would have lost the summer months of the capital renewal program. I hope, again, this is budget 501, so that's as clear as I can make it. Unfortunately, just because of where we're at in the debt authorization process, I legally have to take appropriation from the annual capital renewal program, shift it into the Debbie Smith budget, which then defers the implementation of the annual capital renewal program until the fall. That's how that would work. Okay. And then after fall, then I can issue more bonds than we actually plugged in for year one. I can take bonds we plan to issue in years 2 or 3 and move them up, and then cover the annual capital renewal program. But again, then we've lost the summer.
Okay. And on the W. Smith, do we have to allocate right now, just on paper, the 147 million, even though that will not be, that money will not be needed in the first fiscal year? It's a 2-year project, correct? So I don't know if
It's a-
that
yeah,
can be
it's-
separated out, or no,
it's
it has
it's
to
an
be.
encumbrance, and I
Okay.
have to budgetarily cover the entire encumbrance.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, last time.
Go ahead.
I understand now, and I'm for option 2. So I think now that they've explained their timing predicament and what it really would impact for them and this project listing, I agree that option 2 is the best route, unfortunately.
No, I appreciate that, and as I sit here, this is my day job as well, to do the same sorts of things that, the mental gymnastics on how to get any possible chance of not rejecting a bid. I've seen it far too many times where you reject a bid, you value engineer, it's going to cost more. Absolutely, this project is going to cost more, regardless of whatever happens. The hard part, I think, right now is the funding issue and how do you actually get there to do it. And, from my perspective, that's why, at least starting the project with, with a phased approach, at least gets this project going and it doesn't put it on the back burner that someone says, well, do we really need that in the future? I think that, given the facts that we've been provided and understanding how all this works, I think that's, I think staff has done a great job of trying to work through all of these things. Now, if, Q&D wanted to come forward and say, hey, we'll knock $35 million off this thing, I'm sure we could get there tonight to get an award. But I think the school district, the Board of Trustees is going to have an equally hard time trying to figure out, legally and other things, how to make this actually work. So I do think that staff has done a great job trying to work with all parties to try to get there. Like I say, it pains me to have to, to throw out that I agree that, rejecting these bids is probably the best thing for this project, just because of the way that things are done, because it's going to cost more in the end. But I don't think there's an option here for the school district, unfortunately. So those are my comments, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Ivory.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, could we, I mean, when you say phased approach, it sounds like it's a lot of phases. But next fiscal year, when we do have the bond appropriations, that will give us more leeway, I hope, to decide how many phases we actually need. Is that correct? I mean, maybe when I read phases, I'm thinking like 8 phases. But perhaps it's just a phase to get us going and then a phase to finish us up when we have the funds.
I mean, just for the purposes of discussion, we've generally been anticipating like a 3-phase scenario. And that's not been determined, but not 8.
Mr. Ivory.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say I really appreciate everyone's attempt here, right? I think we can all leave this meeting knowing, man, we did give it the best try we could. One thing that I think, though, if we're going to go to option 2, is we somehow, some way, we have to get an escalation clause in that contract for phase 2, because as owners, we can put contingency money on it for ourselves in our budget, but then we're in control of that, right? If prices go up, we've got the money to pay for it. If prices go down, we got the money to get back from it. I can assure you that a big part of this $35 million overage is the CYA that the subcontractors are putting in their bids, that if the prices do not go up, we are still going to pay for. Speaking as a contractor, that's kind of how it works. If the escalation clause protects both sides of the table. So my recommendation is, I agree. I think we've beat this horse dead. Option 2 really is, I think, the best option, but I'm going to push really, really hard to convince everybody that option 2 only works with an escalation clause in the contract, because without it, we are just in the same spot each time. That's why the numbers are up and so up so drastically. So that's my 2 cents.
I would agree with Mr. Ivory. I think that's critical because my first question is, I really don't want to rebid again. And if we do option 2 and we've got to open those bids up, I think, tell me, because you're the contractor, would that escalation clause in it help us retain and or get the bids that we need in order to move forward and not just have everyone say, oh, well, forget it, we're not in on this one. I mean, I'm worried, are we going to have the contractors that we need to get the job done if we have to put it out for rebid? And would an escalation clause help prevent that and help for the contractors and for us to make sure that that we can cover ourselves, because none of us has a crystal ball. We don't know what prices will do and availability of product and all of that. But would that, in your opinion, Mr. Ivory, as a contractor, would that help?
Well, I think it certainly helps. It's just that, unfortunately, it's kind of like, the ring of the bell when we can ask council, but I know if I was a subcontractor and I passed on this job because there wasn't an escalation clause in the contract, and then was one renegotiated into the contract later, I would probably quickly call my attorney and sue the district for the fact that you've made a significant change that kept me from bidding the job, and therefore but I'm not an attorney. I just know that if I was to call my attorney would say, of course, my attorney always wants a fight, but they would say, yes, we absolutely, I think we'd be at risk. And all we would do at that point, more than anything else, is we would only just delay the project even more. So that would be my 2 cents.
So are we not at a risk already because we're going to put it back out for a phased approach, which is why you have to rebid, because we're changing what the contract is by doing the phased approach. So we're already making a change to what these contractors bid on to begin with. So I don't know, and I'm not a lawyer either, what that liability, if it's any higher or different. I don't have, obviously, a legal opinion on that.
I think Adam could attain to this, but that's why we have to put it out to rebid. That's why much like our hands are tied on option 1 because we don't have the money, on option 2 our hands are kind of tied that unfortunately we have to, and it's not what anybody wants to do, but it's what we have to do. It'd be much easier to put all the contractors into a room and say, okay, let's negotiate the escalations out of it with this clause, and we're going to do it in this phase, and just have that big negotiation. But that, real world, that just that would be great for the contractors.
Mr. Delgado.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the board. Just appreciate everyone's insight. I think we all want to see this project happen, and it's unfortunate that the reality is it's not going to be able to happen with option 1, which frustrates I think all of us. But I just, as much time as I spend in the Northeast Reno, I know it's such a frustration for that community. And I appreciate Adam, your guys' in the school district and trustees' appreciation for having another option versus I would never imagine it being shelved. But this needs to, of course, move forward. When the phase approach, when will we see in terms of a timeline it coming back to us for rebid and so forth? What's that timeline look like for the community, for us, in terms of certainty that it's moving forward?
Well, of course, any recommendation that comes out of this committee has to go back to the Board of Trustees. We talked about what authority we have currently in hand and what we would need additional approval on in the future. I would anticipate moving forward with a construction contract this calendar year, perhaps multiple construction contracts. That wouldn't necessarily have to come back to this committee. They would have to go back to the board for award within the budget authority that's already been provided by this committee. But then at some point in time, perhaps early 2023, we would come back to the committee and say, hey, here's how much we've progressed. Here's the changes that we've made. and we're prepared to go out to bid for our, say, third and final phase, but we need additional budget authority in order to complete this. That's just a thought about how this might proceed.
So to get anywhere close to breaking ground at Debbie Smith, we'd be looking at what month time frame?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, in terms of seeing anything being done, in terms of Debbie Smith breaking ground of doing anything, what would you anticipate if we went option 2? What does that look like?
So again, option 2 involves a revised or a renewed bid period.
Sure.
You know, so we're probably into the September, October timeframe before we could have a contract executed and construction activity on that campus.
Okay, of next year?
I'm sorry, 2022.
Or 2022?
Like fall 2022, we could have some work taking place out there.
Okay, with the phase approach.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Have at it.
Okay. I move that the Board of Trustees recommends proceeding with option 2 to pursue a phased approach to delivering the construction of the Debbie Smith CTE Academy High School, deferring immediate construction to best adjust and balance the financial constraints and commitments of the district with the need and commitment to this critical project.
Well, I'll go ahead and second that. So, motion by Cardinals, second by Solero. Got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by, comment, go ahead. Sorry, Ms. Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm having a really hard time with this. It's not what I want to do, and I know it's not what anybody wants to do. I just, time-wise, just the whole situation I know is not a good scenario. But I think, it's kind of, are we looking at the least of all evils as far as the course to take? And option 3 is not an option. Option 1, I would like to go with, but I'm not seeing how we can get there on the numbers. I would hope if this is approved, everything is done to move as quickly as we can on the bidding, on the progression of the actual work on the school, on how quickly and how few phases with to move with lightning speed if we can, to not just drag this out and add another whole year. I don't want to add another whole year to this project, and maybe that's inevitable, but I think it really is the interest of this community, and in our dire need of workforce. It's critical to everyone in this community, and it's a promise we've made, but we also have to be fiscally responsible. That's our job on this committee. So I will support it, but not happily. Thank you.
Mr. Avery.
I'm wondering, Member Cardinal, if you would be open to amend that motion to include that an escalation clause be included in the contract moving forward on this project. And then also, I don't know if we want to do, I don't know if we need to, but maybe also let staff know to use a little latitude on putting the added money that you guys always put on top, for your contingency money. Maybe add that put a little bit extra on that, because if we don't use that money, it comes back to us. But that way, to avoid staff having to come back to us midway in the project to raise the budget to cover an escalation. But I would like to see an escalation clause in this contract. I think it helps us to avoid where we're at right now.
I've heard you talk a lot about it, but I actually haven't heard Adam's viewpoint on the escalation clause, so I'd like to give him a chance to respond.
I think it's a very complicated subject, but I think in the scenario 2 that involves reprocurement of all of the scope and phased approach, it presents an opportunity to incorporate some language that can be determined that could likely serve to the taxpayers' advantage in this scenario. So I'd be open to it.
Thank you. Mr. Chair.
Oh, so can I just clarify for the
Yeah, help
record?
me.
Because I understand your friendly amendment request that she would need to accept is for the escalation clause. I didn't quite get for the record what then the tack on in addition to the escalation clause would be.
All I'm concerned about right now is just the escalation clause. I was just referring to staff that, I'm sorry. For the record, Justin, I was just referring to staff that when they put the budget together, because there's an escalation clause in it, that perhaps they put more money in the contingency pile so that we're covered, so that it doesn't have to come before us every time the escalation clause is used.
So just for record purposes in the motion, let's keep it on the escalation clause, and I think the staff would just note your request there.
I would be absolutely in agreement with that. Yes, thank you.
All right, how do I do this?
If you're willing to accept the friendly amendment, you can then agree, and then the second would need to agree, and then becomes part of the motion.
Okay, I accept the friendly request.
And the seconder agrees. Any other comments? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes? Right, okay, just making sure. It passes unanimously.
You didn't oppose your own.
All right, now that we've done some gymnastics here, I know that before we lose any kind of a quorum, we really need to have some action on 2.08. So I'd like to actually open up item 2.03, 2.04, 2.05, and 2.08. Those are the correct ones, correct, Adam, for the capital renewal? Okay. And we'll have action on 8, correct. With that, Mr. Searcy.
So just for the record, the chair is combining all of those, and then the action would only be limited to 2.08.
Thank you. For the record, Tammy Zimmerman, Deputy Chief Facilities Management Officer, to present the 2023 Capital Renewal Program. We bring these to you yearly because that's how we operate on the fiscal year. Wanted to give you an update on our 2022 capital renewal. We've bid through this fiscal year 113 projects and spent over $26 million for that. And we're on pace just like we were last year. So we're moving and grooving and getting things done. Our capital renewal it goes through a systematic process to come to what you guys have in your packet. We have our environmental safety and assessment officers that go out annually and review all the facilities in the building assessments or systems. And you can view all that on the data gallery. And then we take that information that they put into our FICA system, which is our facility condition index system, and look through it, work with our techs in our maintenance department, and come up with priorities. And then within that system, it has estimates on there. And then we work through with our planning manager, our construction manager, and all of those folks to come up with the actual estimates for each of the projects. We also do get direction from our Safe and Healthy Schools Commission for our safety projects as well. So here you've got the beginnings of our renewal in our Excel spreadsheet that tallies it all up for us. You'll see we have ADA. We have a Title II. We're working through that to get all of our items done in that ADA assessment. We did elevators a while ago. Now we're on Braille signs, and we do those throughout our district. And we need to incorporate that every year in order to stay in compliance. Then you'll see we have lead and asbestos in here. We still have some of those pesky things in our schools, and we need to remove them in order to be able to do maintenance easily and appropriately, especially if we have an emergency. So there's a little bit there. Carpentry, that's the next item. That encompasses all things from painting, door locks, to gym dividers, to roofing, and all of those items are in there as well. And those are prioritized through there and estimates with them. We have a structural seismic assessment in there. We'll be looking at that. That's one of our items that we've been tasked to look at through our insurance companies because of the seismic portions that they're in and the failures that we could see. And so we're asked to assess those, and then we do projects based off of that. Lots of painting and masonry sealing because our buildings are aging and we need to be able to keep them in good condition. So Next ones you'll see is our department request. We put out a request to departments to ask them what they might need or what they might see that might not be something that shows up in our facilities condition index. And in there we have washers and dryers. You can see installs for our elementary. We have a lot of little kids in there, and some of them, the older schools, don't have those. And it's costly to vent them and attach them to water and that. So we have a list of them, and we're proposing to install those in there. So helping some of those older schools out that don't have some of the things that maybe our newer schools have. Electronics, a lot of that is fire safety. So we have fire alarms in there, clock speaker systems. Adding speakers to rooms that may not have them now for emergency purposes is a priority for us. And then on the bottom there, we have energy efficiency improvements, which our energy manager, Jason Geddes, identifies as things that we can improve and help save utility bills and efficiencies in our consumption. We have grounds as a section in there, replacing a lot of sprinklers, regrading, those kind of things that older schools need as they age. And as you know, at your own homes, you have to upgrade those and take care of them. And that's what's in that process there. Infrastructure upgrade is everything behind the walls, servers, switches, those kind of things that run our internet for our schools. MEP, it's an acronym for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. That's our HVAC, our electrical panels, and our plumbing, where you can see we have a lot of hot water heaters that have outlived their useful life in those elementary schools to provide the warm water to our sinks in those facilities. Facility utilization, that's our mobiles, our relocate and demolish. Relocate, to the dry mobiles, putting in a wet mobile so that they actually have running water in them. Paving, you'll notice on there that we have a pavement replacement and repair. We used to have an extended useful life, but we're getting to the point that we have to actually spend some money and replace them and actually repair them instead of just coating them for us. Here's our safety and security item. We have on there AACT. They have in the old portion, they have some sections that have storefront windows and doors that we're proposing to upgrade those for safety reasons in this. And I'm just trying to highlight some of the ones that are kind of different and you might have questions on. We did take one section out of here, that was on the last capital renewal, which was our under $50,000. And as you know, you can't get much for under $50,000 anymore. So we incorporate that into our other categories. Same thing you've seen before, program contingency. That helps us if we do have bids that are over budget, that we can go ahead and add a little bit of money to them and approve them. Construction management support, we've been using that for even our roofing assessments and inspectors out there. That helps supplement our team a little bit. And program administration takes care of all of those that take care of this bidding process and these projects. It's not just us in capital, it's buyers, it's bond accountants and all of that. So it's a full staff that does this program, as well as all of our supplies, photocopy, paying for all of that stuff that goes into our department. As you can see there, I did a pie chart on it. Those percentages are approximately the same as even last year. They may have changed a percent here and there, but they're consistent with what you guys have seen in the past. And that concludes my presentation for the capital renewal.
Just to clarify, this action here is just a recommendation that will come ultimately with 2.08 for the allocation.
Any questions on capital renewal? No? All right. Mr. Searcy.
Okay, we'll move ahead. I'll get going in the right direction. Thank you, Tammy. Just flipping through these slides, of course, you have the fine-grained detail in your packet for all of those projects that were just discussed. But moving ahead, presentation-wise, I've got a couple other colleagues coming up to join me to talk about the separate allocation for the IT annual device refresh program. Just to kind of introduce this as everybody's getting settled, last year was actually the first year that we went forward with an individual allocation for, these are student and teacher laptops essentially when we refer to devices. You heard Tammy mention the IT infrastructure component of our capital renewal program. That's sort of the internet, the wires, and the hardware behind the walls. These are the devices in the schools We've got Dr. Chris Turner and Dr. Troy Parks here, the Chief Information Officer for the school district and the Chief Academic Officer, that will tell us a little bit about where we came from, what happened over the last year, and what we're proposing to go forward with. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. As Adam said, I'm Chris Turner, Chief Information Officer. As you can see from the slide, our agenda is quite self-explanatory. Tonight, I want to discuss the background of the annual laptop refresh initiative that we began last year and what we accomplished. We are happy to be joined by Chief Academic Officer on my left, Dr. Troy Parks, who will talk about how these investments have positively impacted teaching and learning here at Washoe County School District, and as well, not just the teaching and learning, but also the school operations. We will hear from Chief Financial Officer Mark Mathers, I hope, to refamiliarize everybody on the finances of the project. I went out there and grabbed a piece of candy, and then our agenda item came up, so I had to chomp on the candy. Sorry, the change in agenda got me all messed up. And then finally, the last slide will be our request. So, let's see. To bring you up to speed, the overall strategic technology plan was approved in 2 segments beginning 2 years ago. And because we had to split it up, because there was a realization that our framework required an answer for device sustainability, there was no internal program for refreshing, renewing, purchasing new devices at the school level or district-wide. That was all done based on budget availability, resource availability at the school level. As you may recall from last year's discussion, the pandemic revealed how critical up-to-date computers were to education. We centered our proposal around the inequities that surfaced due to no sustained, predictable, district-wide computer renewal program here at Washoe Schools. This former decentralized, school-oriented approach presented the district with some technology challenges, yet we identified some centralizing opportunities. So let's break it out categorically. Fiscally, what our annual laptop refresh proposal could provide was economies of scale. Instead of a school ordering 10 or 20 laptops, we centrally order up to 10,000, and we think we can, and we're sure that we can realize better economies of scale, better purchase prices. Operationally, we also sought to reduce the school principal workload and remove their obligation to budget and shop for computers for their schools. We want principals to collaborate with their staff and students instead of poring over price sheets and attempting to identify how many computers they can purchase with their school budgets. And then finally, something Dr. Parks may discuss, but I'll discuss as well, is the idea of opportunities to learn. Our teachers and students were unevenly able to participate with technology in the classroom. We had a mix of well-equipped and poorly equipped schools based on the capital refresh or the capital improvement program. If a new school was constructed, they all had new computers, but 90% of our schools were working with old computers. This technology inequity greatly limited our students' computer literacies, a significant contributor to their college and career readiness. So last year we submitted our sustainability proposal to the Capital Funding Protection Committee, which provided its approval on June 3rd. We then submitted the same sustainability proposal to the Board of Trustees the following week for their approval as well. So to remind you, this is the plan that the Capital Funding Protection Committee approved last year, and then subsequently the Board of Trustees. You'll see we used the number of teachers we had, and then there was that complicated math where we broke it out over a 5-year period. We estimated the cost of each of the laptops, both the teacher and the student devices, and estimated our expenditure. All of those figures were accurate as of May 2020. Our student device bids, due to our research, came in on target, but our teacher device bids came in at $621, so that's well underneath the $650 estimate. So multiply that out times 768 devices, we realized a savings of some $21,000. So, what were our accomplishments? What did we actually do? After the first year of the annual project, what we learned was, despite our best planning and communications with our suppliers and vendors, there continued to be supply chain constraints, something that we're still experiencing, and that impacted the teacher laptop deliveries to schools. We only just received the teacher order, the 735 laptops, in May last month, and we're still awaiting the docking stations that will help connect those laptops to all the installed technology in the classroom, like the displays that we're seeing here. We were able to refresh nearly 9,000 student laptops for our 60,000 plus students. So you can see there, 8,913 laptops were moved to 97 schools for use by our students. But importantly, one piece that we realized with some of the savings in other spaces, we were able to support our K-2 students who largely use tablets instead of computers. So we refocused some of our efforts on our K-2 students, and we were able to refresh over 1,000 tablets, iPads, for our K-2 students. Finally, because we had computers that were 10 plus years old, it was important for us during this laptop refresh program that we seek a leaner and more modern computing inventory, and we were able to e-waste nearly 9,000 computers and tablets. E-wasting older computers, some that are as many as 10 years old, helps us, it maintains a parity in terms of operating systems and patching, so that we're not only using devices that are easier for students and teachers to use, right? So the boot times, the applications that are being able to run, when you have a more modern computer, obviously it works much better. But the other piece that's important that goes unmentioned often is older devices that we cannot administer anymore, that are out of sync with our operating system updates. That leaves us sort of vulnerable to security patching and security issues. So what did we learn? Obviously, with a project this significant, there were logistical issues. Even though our department regularly processes thousands of computers a year, the addition of these 10,000 devices revealed that there were storage issues within the warehouse, receiving issues when 10,000 computers show up at once, that's 60 or 70 pallets. And then also processing all of those computers. When we have the day-to-day operations of processing, imaging, all of the department purchases, like I already mentioned, we process in a normal, without this annual refresh project, we process thousands of computers a year and get them out to departments. This proved to be a bit of a logistical challenge. We found we had needs for storage and processing space because it's impossible to process 10,000 devices at once, so we had to stage it. But we believe we have now, working with Adam's team at facilities, we believe we have now found an internal solution that answers to the storage issues that we were experiencing, as well as the processing space. So we're excited about that. The processing of computers, the logistics of just processing them, involves inventorying, unboxing, imaging, reboxing, and then reshipping out to schools. We receive the computers and perform all those tasks. We rebox them and ship them out to schools. Not to mention all the communications involved. Proved to be a very significant undertaking. Thankfully, we have been learning and note-taking during the process, and we have identified solutions to some of these challenges. We're working with our vendors to have the laptops pre-processed by the manufacturer and then in turn shipping them directly to schools. And the personnel supports that were realized, we have a student intern program that was passed by the board in the wintertime, We now have 5 student interns working in the IT department, which is beneficial to them. They learn real world skills working in our IT department, but also they're not just sitting around interviewing people and learning about our environment. They're hands-on processing laptops for us, and the addition of those 5 people has really lifted the processing burden for us. There was a dilemma revealed when all these new devices were distributed to the schools, as you'll see in under logistics point B. If we are no longer a one-to-one district and only 5 or so of our schools were one-to-one schools, and in those one-to-one schools, laptops accompany students home. And so if we are no longer a one-to-one target district, how do we adequately store and charge those devices? So we realized that there was a cart storage security issue here in the district. We can take a laptop cart, securely store laptops in them, and then have a centralized process for charging them. We already possess about 1,000 laptop carts in the district. We're in the process of trying to identify how many more carts are going to be needed as a result of this annual laptop refresh program. Those surveys, we're using our own internal data and combined with polling data out to principals, and we're still awaiting word from them on how many carts are needed from or for those school buildings. But we have identified grant opportunities in order to fund that, so it won't be part of the capital. It won't be part of this program. As we've already discussed, something else that we learned was moving damaged and end-of-life computers to e-waste was very important in maintaining a more current inventory as well as a safer computing environment. We've witnessed some minor bottlenecks with our e-waste process. Sometimes it's inconvenient to have pallets of damaged or outdated computers sitting in a school too long, or maybe the school doesn't have space for it, or maybe the vendor can't pick it up on the time that we have identified. But we're working through those challenges. Obviously, communications is one of the key factors that we've learned through this, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Well, I'll talk about it now. Sort of in a lighter vein, we've realized that the amount of communications necessary for a project of this magnitude is what I define as X plus 1, where X represents the entirety of emails that were sent during the anticipation in the course of the project, and the single plus 1 notice is for those folks that missed all the previous communications. Seriously, though, communications remains both a challenge and an opportunity for us. We feel like, as thorough as we can be in the communications phase, that we always miss somebody. There was always somebody that felt like that we were surprising them. But the benefit of our project is the surprise was always positive, right? They're in receipt of, by the way, you're getting 50 new computers as part of your annual student refresh this year.
Was that algebra?
X plus 1, yes. Very good. Okay, continuing with lessons learned. Human resources. Our student interns that I already mentioned were a real boon to our production, yet there were still challenges on some occasions when we combined the logistical problems of when deliveries were arriving or when e-waste was being picked up. That created those temporary obstacles, but we're in discussions with our vendors, our manufacturers, and our supply vendors on staggering shipments to the district, which can ease some of those storage and processing challenges that I already talked about. And we're very encouraged with those preliminary discussions. The final lesson involves continuing school operations, and this is important. That's why I left it for the final point. Last fall's smoke days and this winter's inclement weather, along with distance learning changes that were authorized by the Nevada Department of Education, now our schools can be more adaptive to days for our students that are spent out of school based on those environmental conditions. Unfortunately for our students' sort of recreational time, they will no longer be able to sled down the hill on their snow days. But fortunately for their academic development, we can now be prepared for time spent out of school due to weather and ensure that our students participate in their own learning. So let's say it's a Wednesday or a Thursday afternoon, any day, for example, principal's looking at the weather report and distributes. We're not a one-to-one district anymore. We're defined as technology rich, but the principal can take the inventory of devices that they have and distribute them to those students that are in need. They can check them out for the overnight or for the period that we have the smoke day or the smoke day, and then they can bring them back when we return to school. Before I missed the final point. What we talked about last year, and also what I want to surface in this presentation, is we have to mention that there are gaps in this program. This program only renews laptops for students and teachers. Let's say computing devices, because we also go for tablets for the K-2 population. We recognize that there are gaps that go unanswered in technology refresh. Devices like classroom displays like here, or the sound field that we're using, the refresh of school computer labs. The resources that were provided are not adequate to answer to all those. So we're happy with the progress that we've made so far in this project, and if the scope increases, that'll be a different conversation. So now I'll turn it over to Dr. Parks.
Thank you, Dr. Turner. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the committee for their excellent hard work for our district and our community. That was some heavy lifting you had to do earlier. So as the Chief Academic Officer, my main responsibility, and I look at this through equity, are our students learning. And while nothing will ever replace the quality teacher that we put in front of our students, it's suffice to say laptop technology definitely provides advantages. I want to talk a little bit about what we are currently utilizing the technology for. Our teachers and staff are very well adept at accessing Teams, and in Teams we store all of our curriculum, which is a lot more than just the standards and access to text, but it's pacing, access to common assessments. So we have a place for teachers to go to and easily access the materials that they need. Also want to point out, every year we work really hard on digital citizenship for our students. That will be monumental, that we continue helping our students avoid the pitfalls of what can happen when they're online. Also, if you were to visit some of our classrooms, you'd see, want to talk about the orange piece, where in this visual, the blended learning opportunities. In many classrooms, you can see examples of what we call a flipped classroom, where students, say in the elementary school, might have a center where they go to and they're doing something online and working together with the technology. At the high school level, you might see what another example of the flipped classroom, where students view a lesson ahead of time, and then they come prepared to the actual classroom in person to talk about that lesson and answer questions and collaborate around the lesson. Also want to point out our textbook adoption process. The vast majority of textbooks we adopt have an online version, to where if a student's able to take that laptop home, which we encourage, they have access to the textbook on the laptop and not just the hard copy of the textbook. I'll go ahead and go next slide. So want to talk a little bit about the possibilities, and some of these are likely scenarios for the future. One thing we're really excited about is this year's summer school. While we for many reasons, chose to target students that were behind in grade level studies. Also, we had the transportation thing, which I'm sure you've heard a thing or two about. But while we're seeing still really good registration for summer school, because of the technology, we also came up with a concept called the Summer School Challenge. So we're asking our principals and teachers, for our students that are at or above grade level, we want to send them home with a laptop if they don't have one at home, and they can access online learning that adapts to their level. And we've incentivized participation, made it very reasonable that we're not expecting you to attend a virtual summer school all day. But a quick example is like in a kindergarten, we'd have 15 to 20 minutes of them engaging on software that adapts to their ability level. And then, while they wouldn't be participating in sledding or anything, we do encourage some PE and some social emotional learning during the day too. And it's more of a engaging them during the summer in ways that we really did not have before. So we're excited to see what the results of that are and how we can improve on it in the future. Because like I said, nothing will ever replace a classroom teacher that's highly effective. But if we can, during the summer, alleviate some of that summer learning lapse, I think we're going to gain great ground. As Dr. Turner mentioned, we also, in the future, have the possibility of, if we know it's coming ahead of time, we have, after we spend 3 of our contingency days with the state, we can send those laptops home and as seamlessly as possible continue the learning that would have occurred in the regular classroom. That would also go for our students that might be out on some sort of a medical, if they're capable of still learning virtually, they could participate with the laptop at home. And from the academic side, what I'm excited about is now that we are a district that is becoming tech rich, it really challenges us in the Office of Academics to ask ourselves, where is it most appropriate that we integrate technology and 21st century competencies to improve overall student learning? It's not as simple as, hey, great, we have the technology now. We have to be able to provide the professional learning and expectations to our staff about how to most appropriately use the technology and make sure that in the end it's being utilized so that students are learning at higher levels. And then we can go on to the next slide.
So just as a reminder, the funding source for our PC refresh program are our property tax revenues that we receive from the debt rate that we talked about earlier tonight. And you can see there the transfer we made for fiscal year 22. We've spent nearly all of it. In addition to that, we've procured a number of grants and assistance from the City of Reno for devices. So this isn't a complete list, but certainly a recent FCC grant of $2 million was helpful in terms of accelerating the PC refresh program. And so that's the mode we're now in. After we pay debt service out of the property tax debt service fund, that buffer or margin or coverage can be used to fund device refresh, as well as the interest earnings on that fund. So that will be the plan just going forward, moving ahead to regularly and cyclically replace devices.
Which leads us to our proposal in anticipation of another $4.5 million budget, and because we are the fortunate recipients of the FCC's $2 million emergency connectivity grant that will accelerate the renewal of all teacher laptops this fall, we are suspending the purchase of any teacher laptops this fiscal year and likely next year as well. And because we seek to continue into year 2 of the 5-year student computer renewal program, we ask the Capital Funding Protection Committee for the continuation of the $4.5 million device refresh program. Thank you.
All right, any questions on this item? Mr. Ivory.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so it's going to be tough because I got a lot of them. Roughly how many students do we have?
62,000.
And how many devices do we currently own?
Inventory.
Of student, not faculty, I'm sorry.
I only have total numbers. We haven't drilled down. We haven't gotten to the point where our inventory tool has identified exactly how many student computers we have. I have a total computer inventory number of 118,580. That's staff, that's students alike.
Okay.
Computers and tablets. I'm sorry. I should broaden that.
And is that like desktop computers and all that? Is that
it's desktops, it's laptops, and it's tablets. And I should mention 32,820, nearly 28% of that of the 118,000 are 5 years old or older, some going back to 2013. And
I would assume, how much are we spending to throw the old ones away? Do you have like a...
That contract actually pays us. So what we're required by Nevada revised statute, I don't know the number off the top of my head, to e-waste them. And so we're partnering with a vendor. We have to ensure that there's data integrity. So we shred the hard drives or make them inoperable, and then we turn and we sell them essentially to this e-waste vendor who turns around, refurbishes them, and then resells them.
Okay.
That's not a lucrative business. It doesn't make us any money.
No, I didn't imagine. The cost to distribute that you're talking about, I know you said you had 5 interns, but obviously we have staff above that. Where does that money get paid for that staff? Does that come out of this funding, or does that come out of general fund?
No, we have one person whose job is only imaging, and then we have the 5 student interns. All of those positions are funded by the general fund.
Okay. So I would like to maybe just jump forward to, in your slide, you have classroom technology, sound fields, interactive displays, that you mentioned that you might be bringing that forward to this committee soon. And I would just remind this committee that in December of 2022, when this was first presented to us, this was presented as a student device system. And then when it was brought to us in June of 2021, there was extra funding available, so it was brought to us as student and some faculty, which before, just historically, prior to us paying for faculty devices, it used to come out of the general fund through the discretionary funds that each principal had to supply devices for the principal's teachers.
That's correct. And student devices as well.
And then we now have taken on that burden. And I understand we got some grants, and I think that's awesome that we got that grant. But I'm seeing a very slippery slope here that one day could encompass much more than what we're building, because it could be, but at what point do we stop, I guess is, somewhere we got to kind of draw a line in the sand. And so I would just caution the committee that when it was first brought to us, it was specifically stated that this money wasn't going to be used for whiteboards and devices on the walls and stuff like that. This was strictly laptops for students. And like I say, now we're in a position where we're buying carts to charge the laptops because we have so many, and then that brings me to my next question, which is, obviously, it sounds like you've got a grant to pay for those carts. And I guess my next question would be, at what point is it more feasible to go to a one-to-one with the students, like we have at the new schools, where the students take the device home, which quite honestly is what I thought they were always going to be doing. In the June meeting is when I was kind of hit with the devices stay at the school. So I'm wondering, at what point is the cost breakdown work that between the added money we're paying in electricity to charge them, the stations in which we have to buy to charge them, and all that, versus going as a one-to-one school?
It's an excellent question. I feel like you're inside Adam's head because we have these conversations all the time. The response is complex. It's not just fiscal, but it's also academic. So we work within the resources we are provided. And so when we look at, when we try and combine the estimated lifetime of a laptop, which is probably, what I see as best practices of 3 years, we stretch it out to 5. We're not provided the resources that will be able for us to equip every single student in the district. So where do we land with that? How do we limit the scope of the project in order to meet the greatest need? And so, but then the question is, it involves, so I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. IT is charged with fulfilling the technology requests. Academics makes the final decision, and then we have those resource questions again on whether we're going one-to-one and textbooks are loaded on the laptops and they travel home with children every day. I'm working within the confines of the project. If there's a larger academic need to go one-to-one, then we'll have to explore the idea of additional resources in order to support that. Because as it is right now, we cannot support financially we can't support a one-to-one program because we're only meeting the needs of 8 out of every 10 students every single day. And that doesn't, it discounts the idea that students already have a device in the home. So like I said, it's a very complex response, but you're exactly right. It seems like if we didn't purchase laptop carts and we didn't pay for the electricity to support the charging, perhaps there's a means that we could identify to get to the point where we're one-to-one. But with the limits that we're currently operating under, this is where we're at. Does that satisfy?
No, it answers my question. It just, I guess my concern is the whole discussion about this IT refresh device program is equity amongst the district. And right now, we're creating our own inequity when we build a new school and we give 100% device to the kids in the new school, and we say, you guys get to take those home because you were chosen in the new school. All the other kids that are in the old schools, hey, we're doing our best to try to get to an 80% rate there. So I guess that's kind of where, because if I'm not mistaken, I think Tammy mentioned in the last meeting, when we buy them for the new schools, we actually buy 15% extra because of the failure rate of the device in the first several years. So I mean, I don't know if there's a magic, but I'd be curious to know if we was to maybe take a little bit of money out of the FF&Es on the newer schools and move some of that money over to this program to get us closer to a one-to-one, because I think at least I feel like we're certainly going to have to be there at some point. We can't sit here and talk about inequity with new schools having the laptops for kids, and now we're trying to get the older schools to have them, and then still creating another inequity. So sooner or later, it seems like that's where we're going to end up with. And what I would propose is, before you bring us anything on sound fields, interactive displays, stuff like that, we get a little more serious about getting on a one-to-one throughout the district. So
Let me comment on a couple of those points. I only brought up those gaps just to have the conversation. I'm not interested in expanding the scope of this program in any way. One of the significant learning moments that we had over the previous year was the increased burden on our personnel. We don't have the people to be able to carry this out terribly effectively right now. And if we expanded it to photocopiers, sound fields, and interactive displays, we would need to change our departmental staffing significantly. Now, in terms of how we're equipping one-to-ones, or our new capital, like Jaywood Raw, how it will open up, we have scaled back the new buildings to align with the plan, our device refresh plan, so that we're equipping them not at 100% plus 15, we're equipping them at 80, is it 80 or 85, Tammy? 85. So we're equipping them at 85 plus the contingency 15%. So in essence, it would still be one-to-one, but our goal for the project is to align with the laptop refresh program. So while we're doing 80% in the laptop refresh program, all new schools will only open with 85% plus that damage contingency piece.
okay, I appreciate that. And I mean, I guess if we're allowed to give a gap, the only thing I would suggest is maybe on the school bus. I know we've got a lot of high schoolers with driver's license. I don't know how you work that in to make them interns to drive school buses, but it might help some projects.
All right, any other questions on this item? Not seeing any more. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Mr. Searcy, talking about school buses, might as well hit the next one, huh?
Nice segue, Chair Solero. I'm going to be joined on this one by our architect, Peter Grove from Collaborative Design Studio. But this is an informational item related to our central transportation yard. A little bit of background. We have completed a bit of work. I'll detail a little bit more on the next slide, but we've conducted a master plan to study all of our transportation facility needs across the district. As a part of that study, they developed conceptual site plans really for all three. We have basically a north, south, and central yard, bus yard in our district. The central yard's the largest. It's, arguably the headquarters. And this evening, our proposed action is related to the full design phase funding for a major improvement project at the central yard. As I mentioned, this master plan has been completed. There's been a lot of activity and work over the past 5 years associated with all three of our bus yards. Just reading that slide top to bottom, the central yard is really what we're going to be focusing on. Those pictures on the right are taken from the central yard. If you're familiar with that area off of Kleppy Lane, the North Truckee Drain historically snaked through that property. Since 2015, that stretch of the North Truckee Drain has been encapsulated with a storm culvert, so dramatically reducing the instances of major flooding. But in years past, many occasions, that site has been flooded, that damage has persisted. We'll talk more about the deficiencies at that site later. But just for completeness, we've got the North Yard on the opposite side of the highway between Lemon Valley and Stead. Really the primary improvements that have transpired there, we did acquire 4 acres of adjacent property. We don't have a need to develop that imminently, but we have the potential master plan in hand, as well as just some capital renewal investments at that property. And then the south site, we have made some recent expansions in 2018 and 2019 to that site. It's relatively landlocked, but we improved it really to the maximum extent possible and are continuing to make investments there. So that's kind of the background, but really wanted to transition quickly into the meat of the presentation. Again, I'll turn it over to Peter Grove with Collaborative Design.
Good evening, guys. So, as Adam said, we've been working on this for a while. We were involved in the original master plan studies of the north, central, and south yards a few years ago. We've come on recently with a team of other sub-consultants, civil engineers, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural engineers, to put together sort of a pre-design package to better understand the deficiencies of the central yard. And we've worked with transportation staff over the last, it's about 3 months or so, 3 months plus. And, we discovered a number of challenges. I don't know if everybody is familiar with the site itself and the buildings on the site. The site predominantly is in a flood zone. Okay, there was some remedial work that was done to help alleviate that, but it's still considered within the floodplain. The buildings themselves are antiquated. I think the main maintenance facility building is over 50 years old, pre-engineered metal building. You can imagine sort of the condition of that after 50 years. The existing, some of the existing offices are in Quonset huts. I think at least 50 years old. Anyway, we studied the site circulation, considered pavement, found inadequate parking, inefficient circulation. For both the buses and the white fleet, they are present out there on that site as well, not just the school buses. The office areas really provided almost non-functional workspace for the staff and the drivers. We did a thorough review of like I said, the maintenance building. Evidently, there's a backlog of maintenance items on there, about $2.5 million that's on this bullet pointed. Fuel dispensers are underground. There are environmental concerns regarding those. And then the flooding related to the environmental concerns as well. Safety and security, lighting, no cameras, security cameras, inconsistent radio communications. There's some life safety and code issues that really should be addressed within that facility. So we looked at a few different options moving forward, and where we've landed, I'll quickly run through that after this slide. We have a very conceptual site plan and some three-dimensional looks at the building, proposed conceptual building right now. But we're looking at demolishing the white fleet and the bus fleet office buildings. We're looking at consolidating a combined office building with the maintenance shops and bus wash facility. We're looking at installing above-ground fuel tanks to replace the existing dispensers, and we're looking at reworking the overall vehicle circulation and operational flow. So, I don't know if I have to go through all these other bullet points on the goals, but I've kind of explained generally what we're trying to do here. So this is the image of the existing site. Okay, north is straight up the sheet there. Okay, and I-80 runs across the north part of the site. You can kind of see, really it's kind of hard to actually see the, thanks Adam with that. Where they buried the existing box culvert and the drain. You can kind of see there where Adam's got the cursor running through there. So the only portion of this site right now that is actually buildable above the floodplain is that central area. You can see a drive coming off a clep. There's like a ramp that runs, there you go, thanks. And so that area there is elevated and out of the floodplain zone. What you see kind of with a stipple there is the existing buildings that we're proposing and looking at removing and consolidating everything in that upper plateau area with the new building. And then adjacent to that, and it may be part of the building, and we're still, like I said, we're in the conceptual stage here. Design may be the bus wash station, maybe a separate building or part of the the new building, but we're looking at then elevating, or excuse me, we're putting the fuel tank area above ground just to the west of where that existing building goes, which is where most of the bus parking is, and working the circulation through that. So this is a representative site plan and building footprint that we've come up with to date. Again, it consolidates the maintenance bays for the buses, the maintenance bays for the white fleet, and appropriate office space. We see the west side of the site entirely be for bus parking and fueling, and then to the east, employee parking and white fleet parking. How am I doing so far? Doing good? Okay. So this is some isometrics of the building form that we have developed to date. The single story sort of appendixture on that bottom image is what we're seeing is potentially where the office space would be. We're looking at, this facility being a pre-engineered metal building facility. We're going to keep studying that. We want to, obviously come up with the best, most economical building construction for the facility. We know we have some large spans within the actual maintenance bays, I should say themselves, which the pre-engineered metal building really lends itself to. Again, I think as we move through the design, we'll be looking at costs associated with that steel, that pre-engineered metal building, maybe looking, at an option of doing some exterior reinforced concrete masonry walls to try and stay away from steel, understanding concern with cost. So we've gotten into the level of detail. What you see in the roof form there too is sort of a sawtooth roof design to offer up some natural daylight into the interior office areas and also in the maintenance bays themselves. And then we're taking into account also, areas we're going to need for flat roofs for mechanical equipment and whatnot. So that's really where we're at right now. And it's been a great process so far working with the school district transportation team, and we're excited about where we go moving forward.
So we've talked quite a bit about the need for these investments. I want to always take the opportunity to clarify that this is really a deficiency investment or a modernization, not an expansion. Previously, we've talked about it as an expansion, but that's shifted. That's not the intent of this project. A significant amount of need, and we feel the time is right to make that investment. So what's before us tonight is merely the design phase funding for your consideration, and the preliminary schedule, relatively straightforward. We would proceed immediately throughout the rest of this calendar year and look to begin construction perhaps as soon as next summer, 2023. These also have been anticipated in our 5-year CIP, and we'll see the action item, of course, in item 2.8 associated that with the design phase only, $2.5 million. So that's all we have on this one. Take any questions or discussion. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Anderson?
Actually, no questions. I just want to say I think this is awesome. I mean, I've worked with the folks over there that are involved in that, and efficiency, safety, environmental issues. I mean, there are so many concerns with what you already have over there, and to see those changes, I think is going to be a great thing for the school district and likewise all of us in the city of Sparks.
Mr. Avery.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the intent to bring up the entire pad above the flood zone, or are we just going to bring up just the building pad above flood zone?
Well, the existing building pad is already above the flood zone, and we're looking to, yeah, it is. And we're looking to extend that a little bit to the west by about 30 feet with fill to accommodate a potential new building for the bus wash facility. Whether that becomes a whole separate building or part of the existing building, we still feel we need to extend that out and get that up on that upper plateau.
But the area where we actually park all the buses is still going to stay at the exact same?
Correct.
datum, so we don't have to we shouldn't have to get into offsetting grades to protect our neighbors and stuff like that, I guess.
Not right now.
We're not foreseeing that.
No.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions? All right, let's go ahead and push this then to item 2.08. Thanks.
Okay.
Which is the action item.
Thank you.
You know, we'll circle back on 2.07. I'm sorry.
We already did 2.07.
2.06. You want to circle back on that?
We will come back to that one after this action item.
Okay.
They are separate, correct?
Correct.
Yep.
Okay, so the final slide here is a similar format to what you're used to seeing. Represents a total recommended budget allocation of $47.0 million, consisting of the $40.0 million attributed to the FY23 capital renewal program, as well as the $2.5 million for the design phase funding of the Central Transportation Yard upgrades that we just discussed, and also including the FY23 technology device refresh program that we just went through for a budgeted allocation of $4.5 million, again, a total of $47 million. This slide has been updated with actual committed costs against the budgets that have been previously been approved through May 11th. Those numbers on the right-hand side, that's what those represent. But the action in 2.08 is as described for a total budget allocation of $47 million. Thank you.
All right, any questions, concerns on this? If not, is there any public comment on this item?
No, sir.
Thank you. With that, I'll open it up to a motion.
I'll take a stab at it. I make the motion that we approve the $47 million for the 2021-2022 E Major Projects Program.
I'll second that.
I've got a motion by Ivory, a second by Anderson. Any comment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. We've only got two more action items here to take real quick. One's going to be super easy, so we might as well hit the hard one first. Let's go to 2.06. Mr. Searcy, presentation, discussion, possible action on the modified fiscal year 2023-27 capital improvement plan. And looks like Mr. Mathers, actually.
So thank you, Mark Mathers, Chief Financial Officer. So we got a kind of a chicken or egg thing. We went to you, I believe it was in April, for the 5-year CIP, and you approved it, and then the board approved it. But then during the final budget discussions, there was a request for additional capital funded positions. And there were 4 of those positions, and the board did approve the addition of those 4 capital funded positions. The background to this is we've seen a phenomenal increase in the number of the capital expenditures, the combined capital fund budgets, pre-WC1 to now. The number of construction progress payments has mushroomed, in some cases growing by more than 5 times what previous volume of accounting transactions, purchasing transactions, and capital projects have been pre-WC1 to now. And we've been very, historically the district's been very conservative in adding staff. Sorry, this is all prelude to this. Sorry, I see some people looking at the screen like, what's Mark talking about? Oh, the page in the packet?
Yep.
That's what happens when we
I
jump
know.
around,
So we've seen an explosion of projects and accounting transactions and purchasing transactions, and we've been real reluctant to add staff. And I think the the view used to be, oh, when we get past the backlogged kind of growth-dependent projects to relieve overcrowding, things will kind of normalize and the pace of capital projects will slow down. So let's not add staff because maybe there'll be a bubble that will get past and then we'll kind of see a decrease in the number of capital projects. Well, that hasn't happened. And we are struggling to meet the job requirements to process that many capital projects and get way more projects through the same, circumference of the pipe, if you will. See how you, Public Works kind of analogy, Dave? Okay. And so we had proposed to our Board of Trustees the addition of a capital funded buyer position. So this will be focused entirely on capital projects and the capital projects work we do. And as most of you know, our purchasing department actually bids capital projects. The second position that we requested and was added was one more accountant position. So we have only one bond-funded accountant position, and she's stretched to the limit and is unable to take vacations and all that because she comes back and there's just a pile of work. So we asked the Board of Trustees for an additional bond-funded accountant position dedicated solely to supporting that person that also provides backup when that person retires or is on leave and so forth. A third capital funded position we requested and were approved for was an additional planning manager 1 position. All 3 of those positions would be funded out of the program administration line in the capital improvement program. And then the last position requested was a project coordinator inspector position funded out of our government services tax fund, given, again, kind of the number of projects that are funded out of our GST fund. All told, those 4 positions costs is $333,133. And so we are coming back to, and then the last change to the 5-year capital improvement program would be to move up design of elementary school number 5 in the Cold Springs area from year 2 of the plan to year 1. So no net change in cost, just moving it up, accelerating design to start in the 22-23 fiscal year, which will allow us to embark on construction in the 24-25 year. We had it in year 2, and that was too tight of a time frame to do design in year 2 and then construction in year 3. So that gives us the space and time to do that design. So the total change to the capital improvement program, that change is a net 0 change. The $333,000, again, 3 out of those 4 positions will be funded out of program administration, and so we reduced the capital cost out of the capital renewal plan so that it's a net 0 change. But there is the additional cost to the GST funded position in this revised 5-year CIP. So the bottom line is these changes are fairly minor and minimal, but we do want to come back to you for your reapproval of a revised 5-year CIP. And then we would take that to our board for them to approve a revised 5-year CIP.
Question?
All right, go ahead.
So I'm really confused. What is, if 3 out of the 4 of the positions are funded somewhere else, what is our bottom line fiscal change to the 5-year plan, given the position? And you said the school change, which I don't see that school even needed yet. So moving it up for me, I mean, that's not my decision. But what is the bottom line fiscal difference that we would be looking at?
Excellent question. So there is no change to anticipated revenues, but there is an increase from the CIP you approved in April of total expenditures of $1,100,085,000 to now $1,100,616,000, or roughly $500,000. And
Those are for the added positions?
they are.
For
And-
one person or all
No,
4?
so for the 4. So for the 4 positions.
Over the course of
5 years.
Over the course of 5 years. So
Yes.
we're only funding one position over the course of 5 years, and the other 3 are coming out of another fund, or am I backwards? 3 out of the R fund and 1 out of another fund.
That's right.
Okay.
Three of the 4 positions are part of our capital renewal program and administration cost.
Okay.
And then the 4th position is funded out of our government services tax fund, which is included as part of the CIP.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Ivory?
Any chance we can get some more, I guess I'm not sure what you guys name them, but like what Norm does, what's Norm's position that, when he oversees an entire school force? It seems to me like we could absolutely pay for that position. I'm sorry, what is that position called?
He's a project manager too, but it's somewhat similar to the project coordinator position that we are adding.
So with that, it seems to me like we could add a couple of those positions with the amount of work that we've got in the foreseeable future, and we could get back into a little bit more of care, custody, and control and eliminate the CM, third-party CM. And the only reason I say that is then the employee works for us. It's not somebody out there justifying their job to us. It's somebody that's actually working for us. And I don't know if it's too late to tag onto that, obviously not knowing that this was a part of it until a few days ago, but I don't know if there's an opportunity to expand this even further and get a couple more people in there. I understand the need to want to do the third party because you just don't know how long that work's going to last. Right. But we've seen the numbers. We know we're going to be spending and doing a lot of work and a lot of difficult work that would be a whole lot better, in my opinion, to have people on staff doing that. So that's
I appreciate that. I just, in summary, out of the 4 positions, 2 were really financial and procurement related. The other 2 is essentially a design project manager and a construction project manager in essence that we are adding to our staff. To your point, Mark commented earlier how sort of careful and conservative we are about adding permanent full-time positions and maintaining that flexibility for outsourcing. I take your point 100%, and we're taking one step in that direction, and we may reevaluate that in future years.
Any other questions? Is there any public comment on this item?
No. Pardon me, no.
All right, bring it back to the board. Looking for a motion, potentially? If there are no more comments, questions?
I'll take a shot at it. I move to approve the revised, did you give us something to look at here? The revised amount in our CIP 2023 to 2027 project list is. Is it there?
Well, kind of, yeah.
All right.
Recommend.
Sorry, let me get close to the microphone. Yeah, possible action for the 5-year capital improvement plan to the Washoe County School District. What are you looking at here?
2.06. Recommend approval of the modified fiscal year.
There it is. I'm reading all the other bottom stuff. Presentation discussion. Possible action to recommend approval of the modified fiscal year 2023-2027 5-year capital improvement plan to the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees.
I second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. All right, we're going to run all the way back up to 2.01, which is the approval of the minutes for the April 7th, 2022 meeting of the Capital Funding Protection Committee. And I would open it up for a motion.
Move to approve.
I'll second that motion.
Got a motion by Anderson, a second by Bybee. And just because, is there any public comment?
No, sir.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Carries unanimously. So, Mr. Searcy, how quick can you go through the cadence of 2.02? I think we've got a lot of committee members here ready to, maybe it's more that Pete Etchart, with his last meeting, we're taking this, as long as I've probably ever seen any of these meetings go. I can remember one other. 2.02. It's the last item in section 2. And Adam's going to be fast.
You know, the future is quite an exciting thing. I think we'll focus on August 4th, the ribbon cuttings, ceremonies. We want to really get that into folks' calendars, some special events August 1st and August 2nd. And it remains our anticipation that the August 4th meeting will actually not be necessary. We'll make an official announcement if that gets canceled. The only other noteworthy adjustment really is the potential design phase budget allocation for this elementary school. Number 5 is anticipated to be in North Spanish Springs. And in order to deliver it in 2025, 2026, when it's anticipated to be needed, we'll potentially need to initiate that design, as we just discussed, in that time period. But we'll have an opportunity to discuss that later. I'll let you guys review the rest. But again, appreciate the call out for Mr. Etchart. I'll also take the opportunity to call out Member Cardinal, who will likely be signing off her final meeting, at least for this tenure. Really appreciate the service right up until the very end. As is your style, no doubt. That is what makes this committee great, all the great discussion and question and talent and diversity that you bring to our decision making, and as President Taylor mentioned, also bring forward to the board. So thank you very much, Sophie, and best wishes.
All right, thank you very much. And since you mentioned Pete again, it's I think just take a real quick moment, if I may, in between items here, headed to item 3.01, which is the public comment. Pete's been a stalwart here at the school district for, I don't even know how long it's been. I've been on this committee for a while, and Pete came in a little bit after that. But he's a real champion for schools and everything that this committee has gone through for the past number of years that Pete's been around. So Pete, appreciate your leadership through this process while you've been here at the school district, and I know you're going to have a good time in retirement, which, as I understand, is now July 30th. Is that right? 31st. All right. So thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to item 3.01, which is closing public comment. Is there any public comment?
No, sir, there is not.
All right. Item 3.02, maybe not, meeting in August. Adam will let us all know. And then we will move on to item 3.03, which is this meeting is adjourned.